thank you. Thanks for coming out, folks, on this chilly day. Debbie's right. It's always I'm always greeted very warmly this time of year, in January, February. I do a lot of talks about garden photography and other kinds of photography, but mostly garden photography. And usually it's January, February, March, and it's always like, oh, thank you for coming out and showing us these pretty pictures of gardens, because we really were just getting so hopeless. We didn't think it was ever going to come back. But we're going to go into that in a minute. As Deb mentioned, I do a lot of workshops. I do a lot of teaching. I don't have the flyer printed up. I had it up on the screen when you came in, my 2014 spring schedule. I've got a couple coming up at my studio in Northwest Connecticut. I also do a workshop on the High Line and one in Central Park doing trees, and I do those back to back 2 days in a row. That's a nice popular thing. We do that the last end of April, beginning of May. I'd be happy to do workshops for any group that is interested. We can come up with mutual dates, and we can talk about the details of that as well. And I'm going to Cuba in 3 weeks. I'm really psyched about that. I've led that photography trip. This will be my second time. It's my third time to Cuba, and I've also done that to Costa Rica. My first time I was in Cuba was Darren, who's sitting up back there, was with us, and that was a really eye-opening experience. It's a great, great place to go, and it's not as hard to get there as some people think. It's actually relatively simple to get to Cuba legally without going out of the country to go. You can join up with groups, and there's lots of ways to do it. Now, to get to the topic at hand, garden photography. I've been a garden photographer for close to 20 years, and I identify myself as that because I was a photographer. I was a journalist and doing magazines and mostly editorial work for a while, and I've always been a gardener, and I was assigned to photograph a gardener near me in Northwest Connecticut back in the 90s, and I just kind of was blown away by the depth of her knowledge and the level of complexity of what was going on in her space, in her landscape. And so I asked her, and she was a wonderful, warm, generous person, as pretty much most gardeners are. And I asked her if I could keep coming back to photograph during the course of the season, and I did, and we became very good friends. And then I used my work there to get a job photographing catalogs for White Flower Farm, which is if you don't know White Flower Farm, it's a large, very popular mail-order garden plant company with beautiful catalogs. They're known for their really lovely looking books. And that just opened up a whole world. I started shooting for all the garden magazines, horticulture and fine gardening and garden design and you name it, all the shelter magazines as well. And it just opened up a whole career path for me. And I started meeting lots of gardeners, and I became involved in the Garden Writers Association. Who knew there was such a thing as the Garden Writers Association? But it's a large, very, very active organization of writers and photographers and editors who writers and photographers want to get to know in order to get work. So there's a lot of networking that goes on. And now I'm on the national board of that group. And that basically is how I became a garden photographer. I've done a few books, and I've been able to travel and meet very interesting people. The camera, in any field, I think the camera really is a quote. I can't remember exactly or who said it, but the camera is a passport into the lives of others. It gives us access into other worlds that we might not otherwise be able to get to. You can be photographing for something or for someone, and people will open up their world to you. They'll open up their house, their family, their privacy, because you're there to document them. As long as you're doing it respectfully, I think you can go a long way with that. Now, back to garden photography. The way this lecture is set up, it's instructional. There's a lot of very basic information, so if you, as I know some of you are a little bit more advanced photographers, it may be a recap, it may be boring, but if you're relatively new or novice, or if you forgot, some of the stuff like depth of field and how that works, this is going to cover that for you in a way that I've been told is really accessible and easy to understand. So we'll get through that. Then we're going to talk about light. We're going to talk about composition. And we're going to go through a whole bunch of different aspects of garden photography. So I'm going to start off with an explanation of depth of field, which is basically depth of field is talking about the depth of the field of focus. The field of focus is basically that part of the image that is in focus. So when you focus, let's say you're photographing someone's face, and you focus on the tip of their nose. If their ears are out of focus, that's a very shallow field of focus. The depth of the field of focus is shallow. If you focus on their nose and their ears are in focus, and the guy standing 25 feet behind is also in focus, that's a very deep depth of field, deep field of focus. So shallow depth of field, deep depth of field. And this is something that concerns us as photographers who are trying to make our pictures look a certain way. And the way you control this on most cameras, and at least on the cameras that you can have manual controls, is by the f-stop, which is referring to the aperture setting. The aperture is the opening in the lens through which the light passes. An aperture, right? Very simple. Why it's called an f-stop, you have to talk to an engineer. Those engineers are the bane of our existence. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It does make sense, but not to any normal person. So we're not going to worry about why it's called f-stop. Now, this is the confusing part. This is the only confusing part. This is the hardest thing I'm going to give you today. The higher the f-stop number, the smaller the opening. It's counterintuitive, right? And that gives you a deeper field of focus. So how this works is, let's say you're shooting, f-stop numbers also are a little funny. They're f1.4, 2.8, 3.5, 4.0, 5.6. These are typical f-stop numbers, all the way up to big numbers. I mean, most of our cameras that we're using don't go higher than 32 or so. Some might go up to 64, but they can go really big. So higher f-stop number, let's say on most of our cameras that's f16 or maybe f32. That gives you a teeny tiny little aperture opening. In other words, there's a leaf inside the lens that's actually opening and closing, making the aperture bigger and smaller. So when you have a small opening, you have that deeper field of focus. The converse is also true. Low f-stop number, f1.4, something like that, gives you a wide open aperture. We even call that shooting wide open. And you get that shallow field of focus. I'm going to repeat this stuff a couple times as we move forward, so you'll hopefully be able to follow. So on the left, we have a deeper depth of field, right? And on the right, we have a shallow depth of field. People love these soft, fuzzy, romantic pictures. I'm not supposed to do that because I get out of the light and the video loses me. People love these soft, fuzzy, romantic pictures. Shallow depth of field. Very sexy, very romantic. On the left, though, that's the one that would get in the White Flower Farm catalog because, after all, it's a product. They're selling products. It's product photography. People looking at those catalogs want, or magazines, for instance, if it's a magazine article about horticulture, about gardens. People typically, if it's a headshot like this, a plant portrait, you want to see what the plant looks like. They want to know the habit of the plant, how it grows, what the foliage looks like, what maybe it looks like with other plants near it. This picture on the right would never make it into a catalog. You can't sell that plant like that. But in terms of a greeting card or something pretty, it's a much nicer kind of an image in that respect. So different uses demand different approaches. So shallow depth of field, deeper depth of field. To repeat. Shallow depth of field, small f-stop, large aperture opening, same camera position, deeper depth of field, stuff is more in focus. Now notice, it's not all super tack sharp, except for the blossom, that is the exact focal point of the image. But it's more in focus than it is in the picture on the left. Which picture is better? It's subjective. Most people, including me, think the one at the top left is better because, to my eye here, this stuff all becomes visual clutter. It becomes visually distracting, all the foliage. So it's nicer, I think, to have that stuff out of focus. So we're going to talk about that in our next slide. That's called selective focus. It's useful to isolate specific elements within the image. So focusing on the tree trunks in that first picture to appear, or the fence and the first tree in the second one. This is Lyndon Miller's garden we were talking about. And this picture, I like to use this as an example for a lot of reasons, because you've got this very narrow area that's in focus. Just along the rim of those pink flowers in the front. But everything else is out of focus, but you can still read that as a garden. You still know it's a garden. You can see the arch in the back. You can see some of the plants in the back and the fence row. You can read these guys in front, even though they're out of focus, as more flower blooms. There's some people that think that the closest object to the viewer should always be in focus. Well, I disagree, and I don't think there's any problem with this image just because those two things, those flowers in the front, are a little bit soft focus. So that's, I think, a really effective and nice use of selective focus. So a picture like this is all about shallow depth of field. Same thing with something like this. These are great winter garden photography pictures, actually, or great examples, I should say, with some desaturation and contrast and other things done to it. But it's primarily, in terms of the focus and the depth of field, That's how that's done. Just a very narrow part of the picture is in focus. This clematis also is all about very, very shallow depth of field. Now this is macro photography. When you get really close to your subject, this is a corollary of depth of field. The closer you get to your subject, the shallower the field of focus automatically becomes. So even if you're shooting at f/16 or f/32, if I'm focusing on, say, this is room, and I shoot at that aperture setting, all the people out in the store and the TV screens back there, they're all going to be sharp. But if I get really, really close, if I get this close, because I'm using a macro lens that allows me to get that close, and I'm still shooting at f/16 or f/32, it's going to look like that. I'm going to have maybe a 1/4 of an inch, maybe an 1/8 of an inch field of focus because I'm that close. It's just physics. That's what happens when you get super close. The field of focus compresses. Macro lenses are designed to take advantage of that. Basically, every lens has a close focusing distance that you can't get closer than to the subject. You've probably encountered this. I usually, in my workshops, there's someone saying, there's something wrong with my lens. I can't focus on this flower. I can't focus on. Well, it's because it's standing too close to it. The lens will only focus past a certain distance from the object. Well, macro lenses are designed to let you get closer. There's other devices too. You can get close-up attachments and close-up lenses, and we can talk about all that later, but the same thing happens. As you get closer, your field of focus compresses. So here you got a super shallow field of focus. So it's a matter of finding where you want the focus to be. It's the same picture. So deep depth of field is useful where I like to use it where I want to have everything kind of sharp and lots of layers of things that are all in focus. So picture the bottom left, that was a border back at White Flower Farm, a flower border. And from that, you can see there's a kind of a birdhouse at the top center. From that all the way down, to these white Lismachia, the gooseneck loosestrife, these white flowers in the front, it was about 35 feet. Big distance. It's all sharp because first of all, I used a telephoto lens and I stood back and I used a deep depth of field, and that combination compresses all the layers and compresses the subject matter. Makes it all sharp and all appear nice and layered like that. Gives you this textural layered feeling. Similar with this one. I wanted the silhouetting of the tree at the top and at the bottom, and then the silhouetting of the branches and the azaleas, and let it all just become sharp using the colors as a way of creating kind of an impressionistic feel. I do a lot of this type of look when I'm shooting for magazines or shooting gardens for garden designers, because they want to really show everything, the way they've layered their plants, what their designs look like. So here there's this waterfall with everything around it. This guy is a plant genius. All the plants that he puts into a garden are all very intentional, very specific. The one at the top left, there's this scalloped edge bird bath in the front, and then there's a fountain all the way in the distance that I lined up, and I wanted to make sure that you could see the repeat of the similarities in the way they were shaped. So I made sure that it was all in focus by using a very small aperture, a very high f-stop number. Okay, now, photography is physics. What happens when you are photographing something in a given lighting situation, given circumstances, is there's a proper exposure, and that proper exposure doesn't really change, within small parameters. So if you are stopping down your lens and making a very small aperture, you have to compensate you still have to let the same amount of light in. So you have to have the shutter open for a longer period of time. So you have to have a slower shutter speed. Now this is still the case as we get these cameras that shoot at super high ISOs. We don't have to worry about it quite so much, but it's still the case. So when you get to slower shutter speeds, most people can't really handhold a camera steady enough at slower than a 60th, maybe a 30th of a second. If you're really good and really work at it, you might be able to do it at a 15th, but you're taking your chances that you're going to have some blur. You're going to shake the camera. So the conventional wisdom has been always, we avoid that and make sure we get sharp pictures by putting our cameras on tripods. This is a workshop I did up in Boston, or near Boston, at the Tower Hill Botanic Gardens. And I used to, don't do it so much anymore, but I used to always insist that everybody bring a tripod. Had to have your camera on a tripod. Now, that's the conventional wisdom, but I think there's a better reason for using a tripod than holding your camera steady. What are we doing when we're taking pictures? Especially nowadays, digital photography. You know, we get all these pictures. It's like, oh, I'm just going to delete them, and we do. Maybe we delete them. Maybe they fill up our computers. But we walk around. Oh, isn't that great? Oh, click. Oh, wow, look at that. Click, click, click. Oh my God, look at that. Click. Oh, this is great. Click, 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 click. And we take all these pictures and we fill up our camera with all these pictures. We're not really looking at what we're doing. We're just taking these pictures and we're not paying any attention to what's happening in front of us. We're not looking. We're just taking these pictures. I like a tripod because it gets your stinking hands off the camera. It makes you stop and slow down a little bit and think, what is it I'm photographing here? I think to create a photograph most of the time, unless you're maybe a forensic photographer photographing, you know, crime scenes or something, most of the time when we're making photographs, it's an emotional act. We're responding, we're reacting to something that grabbed our attention and said, oh, made us stop and say, oh, I want that. I want to preserve that. I want to share that. You know, a lot of photography now is about sharing on social media. I want to show that to somebody. I want to take that home and make art out of it. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to document this. It's emotional. It's something that triggers a response that says, oh, I have to stop here and take a picture. Well, if that's what it is and that's what it is, then it's worth it to slow down and really pay attention to what is it that grabbed me here. Is it this combination of plants? Is it this whole scene in front of me? Is it the sunset? Is it the smile on my grandchild's face? Is it the combination? Is it the border? Is it the way the light is crossing through here? Whatever it is that made you stop and say, oh, then you can focus, no pun intended, on that and make the photograph about that and make the photograph better. You can change your point of view a little bit because you know what? When you're snapping away, snap, 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 that's when you get home and you say, oh, there were hoses in that picture. Or there's dead flowers on that plant. I could have snipped them off. Or, oh, gee, you know, how many times you come back from a vacation and there's a pole sticking out of someone's head? Or a head growing off of someone's shoulder because the person behind them. Because you didn't see. They were there. You know what? You did see them. But you weren't paying attention because you were so busy going, oh, wow, 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 wow. I'm just going to take these pictures. So putting the camera on a tripod is a great exercise in forcing you to slow down a little bit and really pay attention to what you're doing. It's not called a view grabber, right? It's called a view finder. So find the photograph. Find the image that you want to make at that moment of this thing and make it better. And the tripod is a good tool for doing that. So there's got to be at least 15 people here who know what the word photography means. Anybody? No one? Light, what? Writing. Writing with light, drawing with light, painting with light. That's what the word photography means. Painting, drawing with light. I used to say, what's the Latin derivation for the word photography? And a guy in the back of the room looked a lot like you, actually. It was a guy with a big beard, long beard, white hair. He said, excuse me. He was a retired physics professor, as it turns out. Excuse me, it's not Latin, it's Greek. So, yeah. But that's what the word means. You know, there's an adage that you know, amateur photographers are obsessed with equipment. Professional photographers are obsessed with cash flow. And master photographers are obsessed with light. And it is really, really true. The more advanced you become as a photographer, the more you just pay attention to light. What's the light doing? How can I make the light work for me? How do I work with this light? And the equipment takes on lesser and lesser importance. So in garden photography, this is completely true because you really have a very little control over the light when you're outside in a natural environment. There's certain things you can do, and we'll talk about that. But when you're photographing a scene, certainly, there's not much you can do. So here's the same spot, same place, photographed on one day, a few hours apart, with different lighting circumstances. So the one at the top left is early on, right after sunrise, with some direct early morning warm sunlight, and then later on when some clouds came in, more neutral, you know, cooler, flat light. Very different, very, very different feeling to both those photographs, even though it's the same place. Oh yeah, Steven Spielberg did say that. Light is everything. I mean, gardeners certainly know this. You know, 99.9% of all life on Earth is here simply because of the light of the sun. Light is everything. We don't even realize how important light is to our daily functioning. The moods we have, what we do, why we do it, the decisions we make. Light is part of everything we do. And as photographers, that's what the word is. We are drawing with light. That's what we're doing. So you got to pay attention to it. Similar to the last one, this is a shot I did for a designer, a landscape designer. Bright light a little later in the day there. Early morning, a little mistier on the bottom left. Very different kind of feeling. So light has a number of properties that I like to break it down into. It has intensity, color, and direction. So intensity. Garden photographers frequently will say, oh, you need to photograph gardens and flowers only in soft light, overcast days. Certainly there's a lot of truth to it, but I don't like absolutes. Peonies, certain flowers are just magical in soft light. It has this just really generous, forgiving quality. Portrait photographers, wedding photographers know this too. No wedding photographer wants to photograph a woman in a white dress standing next to a guy in a black suit in the bright sun, because it's way too much contrast. Contrast is not necessarily eliminated, but much, much more greatly reduced when you have soft light. When you have bright, direct, hard light, you get sharp edges to your shadows. You lose the detail in the highlights, and you lose the detail in the shadows. The human eye can see a great range of tonality from white to black, and everything in between. The camera can't see that range of tonality. Camera can only see a much more limited range at any given time. That's what the correct exposure means. It's going for that correct exposure of a certain range of tonality, but can't do the whole thing. I mean, standing right here, I can see the grids against the white lights and these lights that are lighting me up, and I can also see details in your faces. The camera wouldn't be able to see that. If I took a picture right now, I'd have these two big white squares, and everything else would be black. And if I tried to underexpose it severely, I might be able to get some detail in the shadows, but the camera wouldn't see the highlights and the shadows. Same thing, I could see detail out there where it's lit up. Camera wouldn't see that. So the conventional wisdom is we like soft overcast light. Here's a picture taken in hard light, not a very attractive garden photograph, no detail in the highlights, no detail in the shadows, not a particularly great composition. Better composition, but again, you're losing some detail, but at least you do have some of the detail on the house. Situations like this, you just got to make a decision. What's most important? What do I want to capture? Go for the highlights, go for the shadows. Hard direct light, similar plant. Do I have to click it? I have to click it. Similar plant and soft overcast light. Very different kind of picture. I'm not saying one's better than the other though. The folks who say you have to shoot in soft light would say, oh, the one on the right is the good one. I think the one on the left is perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with it, just different. Different color. You can almost see the different coloration. The blue is much darker. You lose some detail in the shadows. Here you see more what the plant looks like, but that's not necessarily a better picture. Depends on what you want out of your photograph. With the soft light, you do see a broader range of textures. As I said, there's no contrast or less contrast, so you get a much better representation of the textures that are present. But I don't think it's one or the other. I think my favorite kind of light to shoot in is something more like this, where there's some haze, but you want to have some shadow, some dimensionality. The problem with soft overcast days, portrait photographers call that, well, everyone calls that flat light, because there's no shadow, there's no dimension. And things look dead when there's no dimension. At least when you have some shadowing and some shading, it's more alive, it's more dimensional, looks more real to what the human eye sees. So I like hazy, I like some sun, some direct light, just not necessarily the brightest overhead light that might be. And then again, it also depends on what I'm shooting. I've been in plenty of circumstances where that light works out just great. So bright light, overhead, shot on film. One day I should go back in and take out that stick, don't you think? This guy. It's an old slide. One day I'll do that. But that's what we had to deal with. in slides. But you can't see the detail in the border edge. It's a whole big long edge, a river of lambs here. But it's a perfectly acceptable photo as far as I'm concerned. Shot in very bright light. You don't have detail in the highlights, you don't have detail in the shadows, but it's okay, it's fine. It doesn't have to be soft light. There's 360 degrees, on the compass, 360 degrees of light. Why limit yourself to just one kind? You find the right photo for the light. So direct light, you can change your angle and shoot with the light being backlighting or side lighting, rim lighting, like studio photographers like to do. I mean, how many times, well, I'll get to this with the color, but even so, it's a very popular lighting convention now in portrait photography, especially in sports magazines, where there's two rim lights, two lights, so you see the face lit hard on the cheeks and on the shoulders and maybe a little bit on the top. And what that does, the reason they do that is because it pulls the subject out from the background. It's called separation. And that's what that does. That's what that rim lighting does. It makes the subject pop off the screen at you. Light also has color. Photographers talk about magic light and the magic hour. This is that light early in the morning or later in the day. When the sun's low on the horizon, it's a very warm, glowy kind of light. The color of the light is different than when it's directly overhead, or certainly on an overcast day. We love this kind of light. Photographers have been using this for generations. And I used to think, I wonder if it triggers responses in the brains that make us feel better, because we do love this kind of light. Everybody loves this kind of light. And if you watch, when you go home tonight, if you're watching TV or a movie or whatever, look at the lighting they use. Look at the color of the light. I guarantee you, if it's a soft cell, if it's a romantic scene, if there's babies, puppies, kittens, or any other baby animals in the scene, you're going to see warm light. Guarantee it. If it's a fight, war scene, angry, scary, it's going to be cooler, much cooler light. And they do that because they know that it manipulates the way you feel about what you're watching. And it turns out that's true. There have been some studies now, and they've proven that this warm, glowy light makes us go, slows us down, we feel a little bit better. And if you think about it, our brains we're still living in caves, right? And when we were living out on the plains and the savannas and in the caves, what are we doing early in the morning and late in the day? We're slow. We're not rushing around chasing something to kill it, to eat it, or running away from something that's trying to kill us. We're slow. We're getting ready for the day. We're putting the kids to bed, whatever. That's what that light does for our brain. It triggers those kinds of responses. We use that in our photography. Why not? I'll photograph anything in good light. I mean, this is done in a book, but it was just something that I caught. I'll photograph a rock, a stone, you name it. You can photograph the most fascinating, incredible, beautiful person in the world, and if the light's not good, it'll be an okay photograph. It might even be a good photograph, but it's going to be not likely. But you can photograph a rock, you can photograph a blade of grass in beautiful light, and you can get a great photograph. It's all about the light. So another aspect to the color of light is what happens this time of year. Well, we don't really have so much magic light. But especially if there's snow, what happens is on a day like today, a clear day like today, you've got the snow, big white reflector on the ground, reflecting the blue sky, bouncing that blue light all over the place. We used to have to correct. You see how the shadows are bluish? We used to have to correct when I was photographing these things in film days. We have to put an amber filter, a warming filter on our lens to correct for the shadows, because people didn't like that blue cast because it was cold. It wasn't as comfortable to look at. And now, of course, you can do it all in digital. But the color is still there. That blue color is still there. I like to use the magic light to photograph white flowers in direct light. I like direct light because it's dimensional. And one thing about the magic light early in the day, late in the day, is the light isn't as strong. It's direct light, but it's not as strong as that overhead direct light, because there's a little bit more atmosphere that the light has to pass through to get to you. So there's more dust and more stuff, more particulate matter. It breaks it up, it softens it by the time it gets to you. That's why the light doesn't feel as hot. The sun isn't as hot early in the morning or late in the day, because it has to go through the angle of the atmosphere. It has to pass through a little bit more to get to you than it does when it's directly overhead. So it's a little softer, even though it's direct light. Light has direction. Gardeners, garden designers plant certain plants in certain places specifically to get this effect. This is a miscanthus, a tall grass. These things are about 6 feet tall, can be up to 8 feet tall, and it's backlit. They plant them so that the sun will come through it into the garden, because this is what they want to see. You don't want to see it with the light on it directly. You want to see the light coming through it, that nice frilly, feathery kind of look. But you can use backlighting. I love backlighting. Backlighting is my favorite kind of way to shoot. Shoot directly into the light. Remember that Kodak, remember Kodak film, the canisters? And you'd open them up and there'd be this little piece of paper in it and you unfold it and it told you how to take better pictures. And there was the stick figure family. There was Daddy stick figure and taking pictures, and it was the directions said, always photograph with the sun behind you over your shoulder, lighting your subject directly. And then you had Mommy and the baby stick figures squinting it back at Daddy because the light was right in their face. And that's baloney. You know, I like to shoot more into the light because you get that backlighting effect. You get the separation, and you can use translucent flowers in the garden or translucent foliage in the garden to enhance that, to use that. So here's another example of that. Shot this for a garden designer. You can see from the line of the shadows of the plants coming this way that the sun was coming towards me. I'm shooting almost directly into the light. And these tulips, this is not Photoshop. This is not enhanced. All these tulips were translucent. The light was hitting them and making them glow, making them pop like lollipops. And if I shot it from the other direction, it would look very, very different. Here's one I did also for a designer client. He wanted to have a picture that would show this grass growing within the path of the laid down stones. And these were consecutive. These are 2 consecutive frames. I did this specifically to illustrate this. So the one on the top left is backlit. I'm shooting towards the light. The one on the top right is with the light over my shoulder. That's the Kodak version. Which one do you think he wanted to use? It's sexy. It's beautiful. You know, it's selling the steak, selling the sizzle rather, instead of the steak. So here's a little example also about direction of light. I wish I had a pointer with me. If you look at this, this is a shot on my kitchen table. And okay, so there's a window up there on the left. So the light is coming from the window. Now look at the highlights on these stalks. These are some daffodils that were forced in February. You can see the highlight on the left side of the stalks. But you also see a highlight on the right side of the stalks. Now this is a little anal sounding, but this is what photographers do. Back in the, gosh, I guess it was the 60s, the photographers used to, the fashion photographers in New York City would rush out to the newsstands to buy the latest issue of Vogue or whatever the fashion magazine at the time was. And they would grab it and run back to the studios with a magnifying glass and look at the eyes of the model on the cover of the fashion magazine. Because in the eye is a concave mirror, convex mirror, like the back of a spoon, and it would reflect the studio of the photographer who took the picture. And so they would look at those to see what his lighting setup was. Because if that got him the cover of Vogue, they were going to do it and try to get the cover of Vogue next time. So this didn't last too long, but this lasted for a couple of years that they were doing this until the magazine started retouching the reflections in the eyes of the models, because it was kind of silly because they were getting bothered by these photographers doing this. But photographers, that's the point is, you want to look at where the light is coming from. When you're looking at photographs, I do it all the time. You look at where's the light, how do they do that, what's the source of the light, what are they doing, is it more than one source? Even in the age of digital, you can still do this, even though there's a lot of manipulation and fooling around. It's a good way to figure out how something was digitally manipulated, because you can see if it doesn't make sense, then there must be some digital stuff going on here. Anyway, but you can see there's a highlight on the left side of the stalk, but there's also a highlight on the right ones on the right side. So how did I get a highlight on both sides? I used a reflector. They sell them here. They sell them everywhere. There's a zillion different kinds of reflectors. They're these foil, they started off originally as pieces of cardboard that photographers wrapped foil on or put white paper on and use them to bounce light back onto a subject. And now you can buy them commercially. They fold up, they unfold, different sizes, different levels of reflectivity. They come in gold, silver, black, white, all different colors. You can really, the sky's the limit. And what I did was I just simply took a gold reflector, stuck it over here on the right, so I have light on both sides. This is that same rim lighting thing with the face that I talked about. This creates separation. It pulls the subject out of the background towards the viewer, makes it a little more engaging with the viewer. This is a different use of a reflector. This was a White Flower Farm shot. Basically, the light is coming from the kind of the left about 11 o'clock and coming down onto the tops of these very tall flowers, verbascums. But it was black down at the bottom where the foliage was, and I needed to show the foliage because this is for a catalog. So I took a big gold reflector, hit some sunlight into it, bounced it down into the foliage. The only reason you can see any of the foliage is because I'm lighting it with a reflector off to the side here. The main point that I'd like to make about this picture, though, is what's going on at the top. If I was shooting it on an overcast day, first of all, I wouldn't have this nice glowy, feel to it. But second of all, I'd have a blank white sky. And a blank white sky, in my opinion, is kind of boring and ugly. Especially when you're shooting gardens and flowers, pretty blue sky is a lot more effective. Especially if it's got some nice clouds in it, like this one does. So we got this positive negative space thing going on at the top with the fingers of these flowers, and I got a nice blue sky, which leads me into the topic of what's going on in your background. This is the whole thing about taking your time and looking at your photograph while you're making it. I learned in college from a photography teacher, one of the tips that he gave us was always look at the four corners of the frame when you're looking through it. Look at the four corners of the picture before you press the shutter. Because by moving your eye around like that, you'll see all kinds of things that are in your picture that you may not have realized were there. And you can eliminate them or deal with them or at least recognize that they're there. So having a good sky makes, and thinking about what's in your background is really important. Leads us into composition. Everybody still with me? I can't see anybody. Okay, so this is a garden. This is actually that first garden that I photographed, that garden rider I talked about. This isn't that year. I've still photographed this garden. But she has, one of the things she's known for, she's got that border back there, but one of the things she's known for is her patio gardens. She does lots and lots of containers. You can see basically in the middle. These are all plants in pots in the front here. None of those are in the ground. She's known for that. But the thing that really grabbed me here that I wanted to photograph was the fountain. Does anybody even see the fountain? There's a fountain in the middle of that picture. And I was standing there thinking, oh, this is great. I got the border, I got the flowers, I got the container plants, I got the archway, I got all these repeating forms because I have the circular plant in the pot and the tree, and the circular fountain, and then the circular arch. And I wasn't thinking that, but I got this ugly garage building and I got this ugly patio. It kind of ruined the picture. So there's an adage that comes from war photography. It says, if your pictures aren't good enough, you're not close enough. And typically, when someone's like, Rich, give me quick, I only got 30 seconds, give me one really good tip for photography, get closer. If you get closer to your subject, chances are you'll have a better picture. And if you think you're close enough, you're probably not. So I move in, eliminate a lot of that stuff, and it becomes a stronger photograph. And if I move in again, even more, now it's about what I first saw, the thing that grabbed my attention to begin with, that really interesting fountain that I liked.
Oh, I just noticed the chicken.
And the chicken is cool. Yep. There's actually 2 chickens in there.
Yeah.
Another thing I like to tell people to do is turn your camera vertically. Turns out I actually shoot more pictures like this, vertically, than I do horizontally. And there's, I think, the strongest one of the bunch. Getting really close, turning it vertically. And you can just use a zoom to do that. You don't always have to move in closer. Using a zoom lens gets you closer. Nothing wrong with that. A trick that I like to use a lot, I call it leading lines. If you have a line, there's lines in almost everything that you would photograph. And pretty much everything. You may not see them, they may not be obvious, it may not be a fence row or an actual line or a path, but typically there's lines. It could be the lines of stems or the lines of veins on a leaf, all kinds of lines in our images. And if you have a line starting at the corners as opposed to dead center somewhere off in the middle, it leads the eye into the frame. And then the eye is free to move around inside. This also has a depth of field fall off. Here's one with more leading lines. Gardeners, are there any gardeners here? Anybody here do some gardening? Me? Am I the only one? One guy in the back? Okay. Gardeners like stuff. Gardeners love stuff. They're always putting stuff in their garden. There's lots of, you name a tchotchke or a thing and it's in a garden. I've got a hubcap in my garden as a garden ornament. So I like to use the gardener's stuff as a focal point sometimes. So we've got this fellow here. This is obviously some people of means, so I thought having this little guy in the front of the picture made some sense. And then the lines lead your eye in, and you can spend a little time back in those borders and realize how much really is going on in this garden, because there's quite a bit. More leading lines, using the S of the serpentine wall, starting at the corner, pulls you right in, and then you kind of notice off on the side the circular stairway, which echoes the curve of the wall. Shooting down a path, like on the right, or at a tall building like that on the left, just by the optics of the lens, will automatically give you leading lines. Just make sure your corners are where you want them to be, that your lines start or don't start where you want them to be, and you've got lines that your eye just shoots right into that frame. And then you can use, take a little time to compose the image to make it a little more interesting. So I used the trees to silhouette on the left, and on the right I made sure that bench was there. Gardeners design gardens with certain conventions. There's all kinds of protocols and conventions to good garden design. And one of them is to invite people in, whether in reality or figuratively, and you do that by putting seating in your garden. You've probably seen there's lots of gardens that have seats and chairs and things, even though no one's allowed in there, or there's never anybody sitting there. But it creates the feeling, creates the impression of I'm invited here, I'm welcome here. We'll do the same thing in the photograph. If there's a seat there, invite the viewer in by including a seat, including a place where someone can envision themselves being. It's a human element in the garden. More leading lines. The one on the left is just a row of pots on those stands. That's just the way the gardener created it. The one on the right is the fence, using the angle of the fence and the fall off of the depth of field to just create a nice romantic feeling. That's also selling the sizzle, not the steak. You don't really get to see a sense of a lot of what this garden is like, but I still think it creates a nice inviting image.
Was that shot like in an f5.6?
Probably, yeah. Not super high, not super low. Probably a 5.6, maybe 4.0, probably 5.6. Okay. Rule of thirds. There's so many things. I'm a bit of a quack about this. At least my medical friends tell me I am. But I really believe that the human brain has a thing about threes. Think about all the things that come in threes. We got the Three Stooges. We got the Three Musketeers. Three Blind Mice. Once, twice, three shoot. Three times a lady. Three little pigs. The Holy Trinity, for crying out loud, right? I mean, and it cuts across all cultures. Threes are a very commonly used device in all kinds of human activities in human philosophies. And of course, what was it, during the Renaissance? Someone probably knows more about it than I do. We came up with, was it Fibonacci's rule, is that it? Where if you take the frame and divide it in thirds and put your element of interest at the intersection of those dividing lines, it's visually satisfying, more so than if that item is anywhere else in the frame. Now, I know plenty of photographers who shoot with their stuff dead on center all the time. Especially square format photographers do this a lot. I've done it plenty of times. And I think that works really well. But I do believe that this is true. When I was in college, I was doing a portrait series of just friends of mine. And without even thinking about it, I always had them with the head right at one of those 2 points. And I've gone back and looked at those pictures, and they're all right either here or there, you know, in that third quadrant. So there's something about it. And I think it goes back to the way we see. And I have a good friend who's a very, very accomplished ophthalmological surgeon. And I've asked him about this, and he says, no, Rich, you're nuts. There's nothing to that. But I'm sure it's true. And that is that the way light comes into our brains, our eye divides color and light into 3 channels in our eyes. The rods and cones in our eyes are divided into 3 different, you know, the nerve endings go in 3 different pathways to the brain, depending on the color that it is. So I think that's where our love of 3s comes from, because it's the way we take the world in is through 3 different channels. Science just hasn't caught up with me. Makes sense. So, you know, it can be on the axis. Doesn't have to be always at the intersection. It can be just something along an axis. This one's rule of thirds because the big blossom is resting on that third axis, that lower axis. This is also a depth of field fall off kind of picture. It's also a leading line. This one is a rule of thirds in a different way because the picture is divided into 3 sections, really, horizontal sections. You got the irises at the bottom, the azaleas in the middle, and the trees at the top. The obelisk is a little off of the axis. I think it needs to be in a little bit, but I think it works because of the horizontal division of the image. And you can do it in abstract ways, too. So here, this image, you've got the railing and beyond, and then you've got this middle ground with the planter, and then you've got the chairs and the table in the front. It's 3 different sections of the picture, still broken up into 3s. And I shot this in a very geometric way because of the geometric, you know, the square of the planter as well. We love patterns. Human beings love patterns. You know, we live patterns, right? We breathe in, we breathe out. Our heart beats in a rhythmic pattern. We eat our meals daily in a pattern. We live patterns all day long. And so I think that's probably why we love visual patterns. We like to see things with repeating elements. It just makes us feel good. It's very satisfying. Gardens are full of patterns. If you can't find patterns in the garden, you're not really looking. And it doesn't have to be just the flowers. It can be the foliage. I mean, that's what plants do. They grow with repeating elements. That's all a pattern is. It's a repeating element. Lots and lots and lots of ways to do it. So this one was shot with a very deep depth of field, even though I really didn't have to. I find that if I shoot at f16, even if f8 will do, I get a deeper resolution of the detail. It can be man-made. And look what the pattern does here. So you got these repeating watering cans, and then you have the hostas, the plants right above it. The whole bottom half of the image is pattern. So strong that you don't even realize, or at least it took me a long time before I realized, that the table behind it is sliding off. It's a tilted horizon. The whole horizon is off kilter. But I don't care because the pattern at the bottom is so strong. Patterns can be asymmetrical. This is simply the way this plant grows. These are nasturtiums. This is actually the same basic principles in both pictures. I've got leading lines starting at the corners. I've got depth of field fall off, very, very shallow depth of field. Hot and cold colors. A lot of garden designers will think about this when they're designing their plants, what they want to put in the garden. Hot colors will advance toward the viewer. Cold colors will recede away from the viewer. Sydney Edison, that very first gardener whose place I went to, this is her daylilies and miscanthus grass on the right, and she wrote a book about the palette of the garden and using hot and colds in this way. That's where I learned it. More hot and cold. So the tulips really jump out at you. This picture was cropped. I got to fix it. Against the blue and the green, the cool blue and green of everything else, of the rest of the shot. This one's my favorite. So these echinaceas, I got leading line. You know, you got this line, this kind of curvy line of the flowers, the repeating pattern, and the depth of field fall off. This is also done on a super bright sunny day, and I took a diffuser. Basically, it's kind of like a reflector, only without reflecting material. It's just soft, you know, diffusion material, which can be anything. It can be cloth, it can be mylar, and they sell those here. And I had my assistant hold the diffuser over the flowers. You can kind of see where the light cuts, the shadow cuts right through the middle of this one. So that the ones in the foreground would be properly exposed. I didn't care about the overexposure at the top. It was more just to create this impression, this feeling of the pattern of the flowers just kind of running around. And also it's hot and cold. You got the hot pinks against the cool greens. And they really jump out that way. If you've seen, I haven't seen the commercial for a little while now, but last year it was very popular. It was a Pizza Hut commercial. And it was a lot of fast cuts and mostly young people. And it was a bright orange background. And their faces were all lit the same way I was talking about, from both sides. So they had this bright rim light on their cheeks and on the tops of their heads. And they were, you know, Pizza Hut, you know. And there would be one face, then another face, then another face. And everything just jumped right out at you because they had that bright orange and they had that side lighting and they were jumping out at you. And it was very, very high definition, very sharp focus. That's what they're using. They're using the colors to grab your attention. And the same thing with the rim lighting. Silhouettes are a great, great thing to use. So, you know, this is shot in Central Park, just looking up at the trees from the path. Trees, this is a lot of what we do. We don't do just silhouetting when we photograph trees in my photography workshops, but we do a fair amount of it because it's just so many opportunities with so many different kinds of trees to do silhouetting. And basically silhouetting is just having the light behind the subject, but making sure your exposure is good enough so that you get whatever level of detail you want in the front. Sometimes you reflect some light back in to get some detail, but usually you let it go darker. This was a shot from a book I did about gardens in the Berkshires, coming up at sunrise. So the mist is coming off the pool. Let the urn just be a black shape, simple black shape, just a silhouette. You know what it is. You don't need that properly exposed. Let the exposure be the rest of the picture. Nice and simple. Very elegant garden. It's also a solution for when you have super bright light, super contrast, not sure how to deal with it, what to do. Let something be silhouetted. And you're shooting through it to the rest of the garden. I'm going to talk about shooting through in a minute as well. That's another technique I'd like to talk about. This is called hypertropism. Plants grow up towards the light. They grow towards the sun. Shooting verticals eliminates an awful lot of problems. I mentioned this earlier. When you turn the camera vertically, you've just cropped out all that junk on the sides that you don't want. Picture on the left, this row of daylilies. Oh, that looks wonderful, right? Pretty daylilies, nice garden. That's a farm. That's a daylily grower, basically. A guy who grows daylilies and sells them to florists and also to people who want them for his garden. So basically it's a farm. Like I said, it's just rows and rows of daylilies, some of which are dead, some of which are alive. And in between is all the stuff that he's left behind or his workers have left behind. So there's coffee cups, there's plastic bags, there's shoes, there's sweatshirts, there's all kinds of crap. You take a horizontal picture, you're going to have all that junk in your picture. Turn vertically, focus on the one, make that your hero, put it at the rule of thirds line, and shoot down the row, and now you've got this profusion of daylilies, and it's so nice and romantic. Here, I have this vertical pot. Well, vertical pot, to me, says vertical picture. So by turning it vertically, it's now about the pot. If I shot that horizontally, it really wouldn't have been about that pot. It would have been about the environment with the pot in it. The pot would be lost. Turning it vertically, I've got the pot and the environment is secondary. More vertical pictures. This is the same as the daylily picture, shooting down the row. That one was just, that's just a magic light shot. I was on assignment for a horticulture magazine at a grower in Rhode Island. And there's really nothing special about that. That's a very common plant, nothing really unusual. It looked like a $3 plant in a regular little pot. I was too lazy even, no, I didn't, there's no tag. But he stuck it in this really cool chimney pipe. And I thought that was interesting, and the light made the picture. And because it's vertical, I was able to really be careful about what was behind it so it's not distracting. It becomes a nice picture. Here's a really good example also. The one on the left, similar to the daylily farm. This is not there. This is a white flower farm. That yellow flower is a twice blooming iris. It's kind of an unusual plant in that irises tend to bloom in May and June most of the time. This is a particular strain. They've got a few of them now that bloom in May and June, and then it reblooms again in September. Woo! Gardeners love this kind of thing. So there's like they perfected it. They had to test this over several seasons to make sure it'll keep repeating before they can sell it, and they finally got it ready to go. Rich, go out to the trial garden, which I knew was not a good thing to do because the trial garden is a mess. It's where there's trash, and because it's a trial garden, they're just out there growing whatever. Basically, they're trying to kill the plants in the trial garden, so the place is a mess. And get this twice blooming iris. It's the yellow one, and if you can get it with some of the fall foliage behind it, that would really be great because it was in mid-September, late September. Because we want to show it that's blooming in the fall. So I go out there, I'm looking around. That's it. It's the only one. Just one plant blooming like that. So by shooting it vertically, I was able to show it against the foliage that's beginning to turn, get the flowers. They cropped it so that you don't see the purple one, and you see a little bit of the grass, and they put it on the cover of their magazine the following year and sold a zillion of them because it was shot vertically. Also, it's something else. If you're shooting for publication and you ever want to cover, you have to shoot verticals because covers are always verticals. And they don't like to crop a horizontal picture to a vertical because you lose some of the resolution of the image when you're shrinking it like that. This is the same as the daylily picture, the crocuses. Crocuses are out when it's muddy. So if you want to shoot vertically, unless you have a lot of crocuses, or horizontally, unless you have a lot of crocuses, you're going to have a lot of mud in the picture too. So by turning it vertically, I was able to shoot across this profusion of crocuses, which was maybe an area this big, and make it look like it goes on forever. I like to shoot through things. This is a really cool trick. Basically, if you shoot through something, it becomes very intimate. You're taking the viewer and you're putting them in the place. They're there with you, looking through. It's a really nice psychological trick to do with your photos. I've done that a lot. And that can be shooting through leaves in a tree. You can get into a tree and shoot through the branches so that all you see is something that's a little blurry and out of focus. That very early picture I told you about where I was doing the depth of field explanation in Lyndon Miller's garden with those flowers that were out of focus in the front, that's kind of the same thing. When stuff is out of focus in front, our eyes know what that means. Our brain know what that means. It means we're there looking around something or through something. It makes it very intimate for the viewer. It's a really nice trick to do. This is my admonition to look at details. There's a lot of great photographers who've said this, that photography, success in photography is really about details, about looking for details. You have to be anal. So this is shooting these incredible containers for a client of mine, and I told him that it was a complete waste of our time because his crew had just watered the containers 15 minutes before I got there. And unless he wants to pay me, I don't know, a couple $100 to Photoshop out the water coming out of the base of those pots, we'd be better off doing it another day. So stuff like that you want to pay attention to. This gets back to what I was talking about, finding what is it that made me stop and do this picture. Why am I photographing this? I'm in this garden. This is a very beautiful garden near my house in Connecticut. And I'm sitting up on some stairs. I'm up a little high. And this is in LA, this rose LA. Basically, it's a long arbor, along these arches, repeating arches with roses growing over them. And this is classic garden design. You have an axis with a focal point at the end. That's classic garden design. And the focal point is this statue, and the statue is nicely framed by the opening in the fence, in the wall behind it. It's an okay picture. It felt so wonderful there. Why couldn't I capture that, right? I wanted to capture the beauty and the sense of what it was like to be there. So what's my first rule of photography? Get closer. If it's not working, try to get closer. So I got closer, but I went behind it. This sculpture is three-dimensional after all, and it was really the arbor and the roses that I was trying to capture. I thought, that's okay, it's not so great. But if I get closer again, now I'm starting to approach what it really felt like when I was standing at the other end. This is the image that I was envisioning, even though I was standing at the other end looking this way. So it's not always so obvious what it is, how to capture it. You know, you got to move around a little, you got to pay attention to what it is that grabbed your attention in the first place. This is a similar exercise. This is a garden called Namkeg. This is in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. It's in my book, Great Gardens of the Berkshires. And this is probably the most photographed and published landscape architecture feature in the world. It's very famous. It was done by a guy named Fletcher Steele in the 1920s. And it's called the Blue Stairs. And basically, to make a long story short, the people who own this property, the house is up on the left and up the top of this little hill. And where you're standing here is where her vegetable garden was, where they grew their stuff for the kitchen. And she said, "Oh, Fletcher, I need to get down the hill without slipping and falling on my bum. Can you design me some stairs?" So Fletcher Steele came up with this. And it's, you know, the rest is history, as they say. It's really very famous. Published all over the place. And you can go there and you can literally find the tripod holes to take this exact picture. Because everybody takes this picture. And there's nothing wrong with taking the pictures that you've seen. And that's probably the biggest challenge now, because photography is everywhere and everybody's a photographer, is coming up with your own interpretation and your own view of things. It's perfectly fine to take postcard pictures. There's really nothing wrong with it, but it's sketching. You're exercising, and that's fine. But at some point, you got to grow up and do your own thing and not take the pictures that other people have taken that you've seen already. So, you know, I'm doing a book. I got to come up with something original. And of course, I took this, and I think I even sold this to somebody for something. But I had the luxury of being able to go back, because I'm doing a book, so I'm going back to all these gardens many times over the course of a couple of years. So I'm shooting it over and over again, and I got close, and I'm shooting through, and you know, these are okay. They're nothing so great. And I started moving around a little bit, and then I finally realized I want to be there in the fall. I want to be there when the color is changing, when the light is late in the day, and I found this angle, and there's the image that really conveys, you know, a little bit of a different view of it, because it's what I was able to find. And I'm sure if you go there and created your own, you know, thought it through, you could find your own thing as well. But it takes a little bit of effort and a little bit of thought. So here's a very lovely, sweet little picture of a fountain at Tower Hill Botanic Garden. And I hate this picture because those damn red chairs in the back always catch my eye, because they're red, and everything else in this picture is a cool color. And those red chairs just kind of jump out. And this picture's not about the red chairs. I don't want them to be so important. Well, I once had a conversation with the folks at Garden Design magazine about doing a series of black and white garden photographs, and they said no way at all, because nobody wants to see pictures of a garden in black and white. I was like, well, I don't know if I agree with that. And sure enough, you know, if you take a picture like that, because it really is about the textures and about the shapes and the forms and the foliage. I eliminated the issue with the red, and now I see so much more in this picture. I see the chair in the front, see the leaves up at the top left. I think it's much stronger in black and white. So don't be afraid to do things that are a little less than obvious, like shooting gardens in black and white. It's not always just about the flowers. I've done a thing at the New York Botanical Garden in the conservatory for a couple of years in the wintertime, in January. They have a come on Sunday and get a little photography tutorial and photograph in the conservatory. And if you enter your pictures on their Flickr feed, whoever gets the most votes gets a free photography class. It's a way of getting people up to the Botanical Garden. And I've been the one doing the photography workshops. And every year it drives me crazy because people come in and say, "Where are the flowers at, man? I want to see the flowers." And I'm like, "It's January, man. It's January. There ain't no flowers." You know, even in the conservatory, even though it's tropical, flowers still, you know, they bloom more by the length of the daylight than by the temperature. So January, there really aren't going to be many flowers. They got some orchids that they put out specifically for the people who need to see flowers all the time. But there aren't a lot of flowers. And my point is that there's so much more you can photograph besides flowers in a garden. And black and white also helps you think about that. Think about the hardscape and the shapes and the textures and the forms and what the light is doing. So then, of course, we have this time of year, we have winter, where you can find all kinds of interesting things. And winter garden photography is a place where you can really, really pick the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. You can shoot a lot of things that you haven't seen before, because not a lot of people go out in the winter and photograph in gardens. So there's lots of great stuff that you haven't seen or that you may not have seen that you can spend time doing. And you can do it in the parks in New York, you can do it in your yard, you can do it really anywhere. There's just so many wonderful patterns and shapes and textures and colors. So I highly recommend, just, you know, if you don't mind the blue, watch out for that, or not. A lot of gardens are designed to be winter gardens, which I've always found to be a very funny term. It's like, how can you garden in the winter? What's growing? Well, it's really about the hardscape, the sculptures, the evergreens, and the shapes of things that will hold the snow and capture the snow. So this is a winter garden, even though he does have things growing there all summer. I think it's really more of a winter garden. This is that same garden. Not the kind of stuff you can photograph in the rest of the year. The only trick is the snow blows off usually within a day if there's snow cover on things, so you got to get out quickly, and you got to dress for it. And if you're shooting with digital cameras, of course, bring extra batteries, keep them warm, because the batteries will run down a lot faster. And I think we are just about finished. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.